Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome back to the third part of our collaborations talk series here. Today we have Andrea Neumann and Jennifer Walshe here. Welcome to our
Hello.
discussions.
Hello.
Hello. For those who've seen, for those where this is the first movie, I might again tell you a little bit. We have these three discussions where we talk basically about collaborative works of composers and improvisers from music, but also from theater scene. And as this is a pre-recording, today at 4 p.m. CET, there is a live discussion where you're invited to join us on Zoom in the discussion. Most of the participants will be there, so you can ask them directly, or you can also write us an email in advance. The email address will also be on the website where this video is hosted. So please write us an email if you have questions to everyone or specific comments to a specific person. You can all write that in this mail and send it to us. We will forward it to the composers, or you can join us on the Zoom conference. And also, Michael has prepared a little text about the questions that brought us to this idea to host this talk. Michael, would you be so kind?
Of course. Now, just to elaborate a bit on this title, collaboratives, it's about artistic collaboration and collective creativity. And we thought that on the first side, the concept of a jointly generated artistic creation in a way contradicts this traditional conception of an artist, of the artist, the creative subject with sort of arcane and therefore uncommunicable ideas. And in musical context, this model has remained largely unchanged up to the present day, especially the market still demands for the gifted individual, or at least the creative mastermind. And the collective represents a completely different concept. Here, the entire process of production and reception is substantially determined by the moment of communality. And the work of art as an individual achievement is pushed into the background by an ensemble. And we want to talk about these ensembles, about their structures and methods. Today, Hannes mentioned it with Jennifer Walshe and Andrea Neumann. And before we start, we want to introduce them with a few words and two short films. Andrea Neumann studied classical piano at the Hochschule der Künste in Berlin. She works as a musician and composer in the fields of new music and experimental music. Since 1996, she has specialized in playing with the inner mechanics and workings of the piano, the so-called Innenklavier. As a performer and composer, Andrea participated significantly in the development of the Berlin movement Echtzeitmusik, that is real-time music, which is situated between new music, improvisation, noise, and sound art. And let's have a look into Andrea's work in the short film Hannes compiled.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that was a short excerpt of a lot of different works from Andrea from 2007 until very recently, last year, some Corona recordings from Berlin. Andrea, in the last two discussions we had, we were speaking a lot about collaborations where people have a lot of discussions before actually the pieces on stage are happening. With you as well as with Jenny, it's quite a different thing as you improvise also a lot. Maybe you can tell us a little bit, if you collaborate with others you improvise with, are there situations where you avoid talking and really start the communication process with playing right away, or is there always some kind of pre-conception talks in there as well?
Yeah, it depends, of course, on the group. Maybe this question is, I can give an example with the big orchestra in Berlin, Splitter Orchestra, where 24 people improvise together, mainly with the idea of having no score, no conduction, sometimes no any preconcepted tasks. And with this group, we discussed a lot during the last 10 years. And now we came up with a new concept. It's called Code of Silence, which means we enter the room. We even don't say, hello, how are you? We just start to play. Then we listen to what we played. We don't talk and we play again. This is a quite radical approach, and I think we only can do it because there were so many discussions before, and we found out that sometimes talking, we are circling around important things, but we are not going into the heart of important things. So now we try this. Yeah, I think what is interesting in this approach is that the responsibility of the output is in the moment in everyone. If we have any preconceptions, we think about we put the responsibility somewhere else. And I think if improvisers are experienced, it's quite important to work with this responsibility in the moment. And if I do something somebody is not agreeing with, we have to negotiate with that. And it's not about, wow, we said that, that's why this didn't happen like we wanted. So yeah, I really appreciate to do this.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting concept, when you really start playing and then listen to it and then play again. And do you do that in a row, like 5, 6, several times, or and record these things? Because I mean, there might even be an interesting process for for an audience. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, we did it in front of audience once, to playing, listening to what we played, so they listened to it twice and then play again. Mm-hmm. Of course, there is a process happening, and I think things change and things are like the learning process you can observe, even though, of course, it happened during Corona and everybody was so happy to get real people playing live, and then to listen to a recording, some people freaked out.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, I would like to go deeper into that. And especially, I think it would be interesting then also to talk about structural things that might repeat or expectations that come. But before we go into that, maybe we shortly introduce also Jennifer Walshe with a short video and a text.
Yeah, a few words to Jenny. Jenny studied composition with John Maxwell Geddes and Kevin Volans at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. And afterwards, she received her PhD at Northwestern University in Chicago, where she studied with Alan Wollman and Mike Pissarro. And to pick out one facet of her extensive work that is particularly interesting for our discussion, since 2007, Jenny has been developing a project named Groupout, in which she houses 12 different alter egos. She has produced compositions, installations, graphic scores, films, photography, sculptures, and fashion featuring those alter egos. And before we go on, also a short film about Jenny's work.
Wearing loose, comfortable, warm clothing. Lie down flat on your back and relax.
Yeah, Jenny, I just want to stick to this Groupout thing I mentioned before. When I first heard of it, the question aroused to me if assembling a collective of alter egos, if this incorporates the desire to collaborate while actually fearing it, and so you just invent your collaboration partners.
Well, I had already had collaborative partners prior to Groupout, and I loved working with people, so I wasn't afraid of it. It was just more coming out of the experience of being a young composer and feeling like I had to make work in a certain form or aesthetic or genre, that it was sort of expected of me. And if I was to shift my practice, that would be considered definitive. So, you know, if you shifted your practice, you sort of had to just stick with it. It was, you know, you had shunned working one way and now you would only work another way. And I felt that was severely limiting. And I was very, like I should say, structurally, the Groupout project came out of a commission, which was actually a public art commission rather than a composition commission. And it was a 2-year project with South Dublin County Council at the height of the Celtic Tiger, just before the crash, you know, where they were sort of giving out commission funding to crazy arts projects, you know, on the sort of the back of the boom. And so I was working outside of a standard music commissioning process for that project. So I had this freedom that I normally wouldn't have. And I also had been feeling a bit restrained. So it was an opportunity to be completely free. And what I did notice was, to give one really small example from the project, was I wrote a lot of pieces under alter egos for that project for my own voice. But then in a contemporary music, Neue Musik concert, I might be asked, you know, can you do a solo concert? And I would say to the festival director, okay, I'm going to program some of these pieces under my alter egos. And then I would do them, and the festival director, we would keep it completely secret. So the audience would see program notes saying it's music by Jennifer Walshe and Turf Boone and Eucorn O'Connor and Detlev of Erens, and the audience would not know it was all music by me. But the way the audiences spoke about the music to me, they spoke in a completely different way than if they thought I had written all the pieces. And, you know, they would come up and they'd say, you know, I loved the Japanese guy's piece, but I hated the Estonian woman's piece. You know, I just didn't like it at all. And they would make comments in a way that was completely different. And sometimes they were really charming. And sometimes there was like hints of racism or hints of sexism, you know, in the comments that they made. And I could have these pieces within the program that were completely variegated, you know, that were very different in style. And it was me being able to, in a way, just sort of operate, you know, operate much more freely in these territories. Of course, now I just operate that way anyway. But for me, Groupout at the time was necessary artistically. You know, it was very important for me to be able to do that and be free in that way.
That's an interesting aspect to communicate to the outside world or to the audience something quite different than how you actually worked to get a different response, or the more open response, so to say, like the people would answer you in a very different way than if they would knew it was by you, the piece that you've made. But also I think it kind of influences, if I read it's from a, let's say, a Japanese composer, it influences the way I listen to it, even if I might just believe I do have some knowledge of how Japanese composers would write music. So that's
I think it's like, it's really crucial, because like Seth Kim Cohen talks about this non-cochlear aspect of sound, like everything that happens that doesn't involve the cochlea in our ears. And program notes and the idea of who wrote it is really influences how people listen to the music. And we pretend that's not true. You know, we pretend somehow like everything is dropped and it's just about the quality of the music on stage. But there's all these other factors that influence how we listen to things. Like, I'm sure with Les Femmes Savantes, Andrea, there's like a lot of people who come to that project, you know, with their own preconceptions, you know, when they see even the title of the group.
Of course, right? Yes. Yeah.
Is that why you formed a new name? The new is slightly different group, right?
Yes, it's only a trio left of this explosive combination of personalities.
Yeah, I think that's also something that's quite unique to the both of you in our talk, at least, that you have a lot of different projects with different people or alter egos, but you both improvise with a lot of people. But that all seems to be like a growing and exchanging network of people that you work with for a long time. So it's a lot of really personal knowledge. You know each other very well for years, and you keep improvising with each other for a long period of time. And I think that's something very special, where you can really hear how the music grows within this group. So it keeps being a communicative musical process in between all of you, all of these different groups. And if you play, Andrea, for example, if you play with one of these groups and there's a new person coming in this kind of group, do you feel that influence like immediately in an improvisation coming to that group, or is it something where you say, well, it's more or less the same thing?
No, of course, everyone's voice is changing the whole balance and the whole possibilities. Yes, there's no doubt that I mean, if it's an improvised music group, if it's not a yes, then I think every voice is yeah, of course, change the sound, but also the ideas and how you relate to each other. Yeah.
But is it also sometimes that you really have the impression, oh, this is terribly going into a way where the whole group, like like a family, and then there's a new person involved, like someone brings a new friend, and everybody's like, oh, that's terrible, that doesn't, so the whole family communication doesn't work anymore. Do you have that in improvisations where you say, oh God, this destroys everything?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
That's quite. Let's elaborate on that a bit. I always ask myself, where might be the conflicts within this process, the frictions and disagreements when you collaborate with someone, if you know him for a long time or not. Where are the moments in which this whole thing may collapse or may at least be disturbed?
Mm. Maybe I can give an example, because I work a lot with my friend and colleague Sabine Erklens since mid of 90s, and we work in a lot of different collaborations. And of course, the two of us, we also compose together and have a very special relationship. And have maybe things in common. And then we have a different combinations with a third person, and the third person changed everything in this way that things that work normally among us don't work anymore. So we have to change. Let's say, now we started to have this trio Contagious that we saw in the video in the beginning, which is specifically about the collaboration or the connection between somebody who comes from the club, more like electronic club music, and our electroacoustic improvisation music. And I mean, musical parameters change, like volume. Very important, crazily important. I never thought about it, that how much my sound changed when I need to go up, when I want to fill a bigger room or want to bring people in a physical listening experience, but also frequencies. So much more lower drones are appearing. So when we tried to combine it, and I played in the way I normally play, which is more like suggesting something, what comes back, waiting, listening, looking for the details. Then the approach of the person who wants to go in the physical direction is getting dropped all the time by my actions. So we, this kind of don't drop, but of course play, it's needed to be alive, and it's improvised. So how to act in this field with my skills. And the other trio with Ute Wassermann, where it's much more about what comes out of Les Femmes Savantes, which is much more about maybe communicating in a very different way, where if you play 10-minute drone and nothing that is important for this trio is possible. So yeah, now I don't talk, so I mean, it's the people we play with are connected to aesthetics. And that was also, I think, the subject of this discussion, how much, aesthetics are shaped by the choice of people who are involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. I mean, first of all, there's really this interaction between different people. Always, you need to react to that. You can't just go with your own stuff. And like you just said, when even something like just volume increases, your own sounds or your own ideas how to develop music has to change or has to adapt to this person, or you need to, I don't know, leave the room or something if it terribly goes wrong. But you need to work on that, different than when you wrote down a piece by yourself, and then other people need to adapt in a very different way. Jenny, you worked on some projects, I think, with self-learning machine, alter ego of yourself. And in that case, I mean, you don't have to be polite to that machine at all. But still, that machine challenges you in a way as it would have been a person, right? If you improvise with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the Ultrachunk project, which you showed the clip from, which was ostensibly a collaboration with Memo Akten, the Turkish, artist and technologist. Like that was the key collaboration. It was between myself and Memo doing this project together. But what we decided to do for the project was that I spent a year making recordings of myself improvising. And we decided I'd just use the camera from my laptop, because then if I was traveling, I didn't have to worry about setting up a camera on a tripod. It would be consistent. And then Memo coded this system of neural networks, which we call GRANMA, because it's like granular neural nets for music and audio, and the acronym he came up with is GRANMA, and they're all working together. So what you see when I improvise with Ultrachunk is you see me on the stage, but what's happening on the video, it's not processed and it's not sampled, it's being generated in real time by GRANMA. So if I can give the analogy, it's, imagine you take white noise, which has all the frequencies in the spectrum of sound present, and you just carve away what spectrum, what frequencies you don't want out of the white noise. And so the computer is doing that about 44,000 times per second, and it's doing the visual equivalent about 20 frames per second. So it's really, really computationally intensive. So when I'm improvising with we call it Ultrachunk in live performance, but when I'm improvising, I'm aware that there is like a Bitcoin level PC, about to melt in the corner, so it's not just like it's a max patch running, on a laptop. It's really intensive what's happening computationally. Memo has to be there to just sort of check the whole thing isn't just going to explode. And so it sort of feels like Memo's there by the machine, I'm there improvising. Together, we're sort of wrangling. If we use this sort of circus animal analogy, we're sort of wrangling Ultrachunk to make sure that it's functioning just within the parameters. So it feels like in many ways like a very normal improvisation experience, because it's not just an algorithm that I press the space bar and I know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. It's being generated live. And there's a sort of a space within it operates. But I suppose this goes back to what Andrea was saying, that I sort of feel like the reason we collaborate as improvisers with other people is that like we have maybe this, latent space of sound we're interested in. And with this other person or these other people, we can go further into that space, or we can go to a new space, which we didn't even know existed. And so it's about those relationships generate those musical spaces that we didn't even know we could get to, or maybe we could sort of taste them on the wind, but we needed other people to help nudge us to get us there together. So with Ultrachunk, there's certain spaces that I investigate, which are quite bizarre and uncanny, because it isn't with a person. It feels like it's a person live on stage. And I suppose I've had more risk. It feels very risky, but I've had more risk when I've played with somebody who was like really high or really drunk, and very unpredictable, on stage. Andrea's smiling. Not that we've all had these experiences.
Oh, please tell us more.
Can I say something?
Oh, please.
First, it's interesting because you produce the person you want to play with, maybe a drunk and totally high and crazy person that you not always find in real life. So you created this partner. But I wanted to say, I think it's interesting to see if, when we think about collaborations that use improvisation, is improvisation a tool to get somewhere and to get something to a closer idea of what you want in the music, or is improvisation really the core of the idea? And I think if it's like this, when the openness to the result, and that it goes maybe in a direction that we hate, and that we have to work with that again, that's part of the idea. And then if we have too much an idea what we want at the end, how it should sound, it won't work, because you get rid of all the time, because the partner is not acting in the way that you wanted it. So, and this is a very different way of improvising than when you use improvisation for a process where you know where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe there are these two approaches.
Yeah, it's a very, very different different set of mind, which also relates to all social situations, right? Where you say, okay, I really want to convince people to go to a specific direction. It probably doesn't work. But if you're open to, let's see what are the different positions in this room, and let's see where we come to, either being a discussion or an improvisation, it might be a very interesting time period we share together. Sorry, Jenny, I was interrupting.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think that like with different people, there's different territories that you investigate, and those territories are emergent. You don't get together with them on day one. And I certainly, the people that I work with very closely, because I work in a lot of duos, and the people that I work with in the duos, we don't get together and say, okay, what will our aesthetic be? You know, we get together and we say, let's just play. And maybe you have 40 minutes where you just chit chat and drink a cup of tea, you know, and then you just play. And then you go, at the end of that, and you go, okay, next time I'm going to bring this, or next time maybe we could try this. But it's emergent. You don't plan it all out in advance. And then just gradually you have this deep relationship. Like I have to say, the deep relationships I have with the duos and the different people that I work with, they're like some of the richest social relationships that I have with people. Like I feel deeply, deeply lucky, you know, because you just make new friends all the time, you know. And for a lot of people, it's difficult to make friends, you know what I mean, as things go on in their lives. So it's really wonderful working this way, because you always have new friends and new collaborators. And because you do different territory with different people, it's like you have your friend who will eat sushi with you, and your friend who will eat pizza with you, you know, and your friend who will only eat Thai food with you. So it's sort of, you get all these, you get fed in lots of different ways.
I wonder.
No, please.
I wonder, like Andrea, you described that a few minutes ago a bit. If working or playing in different contexts with different people means also to bring in different personalities of oneself. If, for example, Andrea, you work with Sabine Acklands or with Splitter Orchestra, there are different Andrea Neumanns working with them, or is it? Are you focusing on one personality, or are you sometimes shifting it or splitting it a bit?
Interesting question. Also compared to Jenny, who is definitely working with so many different parts of herself. I think there is a one, of course, I will play in Splitter Orchestra very different than with Sabine Acklands. Things are not possible. To work through working with 20 people who have all different ideas, and how to bring yourself in and how to relate to the context, how to have a voice. That's a very special thing, and very, very difficult to keep a voice in a big group, because there are so many ideas that you receive, and not to get lost in that, but also not to dominate with your voice. So there's this kind of, it's a very interesting social skill that you learn there. Sometimes I'm not sure how interesting it is for the music, actually, I have to admit. But probably it is too, but definitely listening, understanding others while going through with your own thing is a super important thing also nowadays, where individuality is getting somehow crazy sometimes. Now I lost my track, wait. Yeah, this is, but, and for example, let's say with a trio, with Contagious, in a way, I also have to keep a voice. It's maybe another voice than in this other group. And it's more shaped by our idea of finding a group sound. But to go with an idea that I am convinced by, and to go to keep going with that, this is maybe the same. There I am the same. Maybe the voice is very different, but to suggest something that I really think this is now my decision and I will go on with this decision. That's the musical skill that I think I am working on in all these collaborations.
I would be interested because both of you work, you improvise a lot on stage, and both of you compose pieces also, but also again sometimes for people you know very well and you also improvise with. So, I mean, there's also Paul Norman said that 2 days ago that there's no situation where you actually work alone. I mean, even if he's writing down something on his desk, there's always this other voice that keeps questioning himself doing something. So it's rather a question of how the relation of this collaboration is. So if you compose something, it's much more a hierarchical situation. Is that easier when you do that for friends? So if you write a piece for friends, is it easier to confront with please do that? Or is it easier to go to strangers or people you barely know if you get a commission or something? I don't know.
Jenny?
I think it depends on the situation, because when you say, is it easier to go to strangers? I would say, which strangers? You know, in that if there's a standard sort of festival where all the music is notated and you're writing a piece that's scored and all the ensembles involved in that festival play notated music and don't improvise, then of course it's very easy to walk in with a score and say, okay, we're going to work from the score. I think that what I found, what I actually think is the more important question for me at the moment is just sort of making sure that it's very clear. If it's your idea, it's clear that it's your idea, because there's groups which work completely non-hierarchically. There's groups which work collaboratively, but often it's like one person is sort of steering this piece or steering that piece, and it's just sort of figuring out those things. So and particularly when I work with improvisers. So for example, I made this opera Time, and we had a lot of like the players were all improvisers. So it was sort of establishing, okay, I come up with the material, I lead the devising sessions, and then we all split the royalties to make it completely fair, you know, to represent the work that they're contributing in the room. So I think so I'm having conversations very, very early with people where I say, it's this sort of project, I'll do this, my name will go here, but we'll split this and you'll get paid like this. And people go, fantastic, I'm really happy, you know, my name is represented and I get paid decently. Because I think where the big problems come in is where a composer collaborates with a performer, and the performer has really helped shape the piece and devise it, and that isn't represented. You know, and in the rock world, they've been dealing with this for years. You know, where sort of people are saying, "No, I need songwriting credit," or like, you know, the drummer on the David Bowie track, is it David Bowie or is it the drummer? You know, who is it? So I think it's just finding ways to be fair. Because I've been burned. I've been the other side of it. That's the other thing too, is I've been the other side where like people had me improvise and then I was never credited, you know, or they even took things that they never let me listen to the recording before they released it, or they took parts of the recording they said they'd never use, you know, and use those. So I've had those experiences on the other side where I'm like, you have to be upfront with people and be fair. And then it makes life easier because people understand how the structure of the project is working.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very important issue. We slightly talked about when we had people from the free performance scene, so rather theater, where it's much more common to work as a group and also announce yourself in a group name.
Yeah.
Different to compose music. I mean, in improvised music, you can come as a group as well, because I think it's much more related to band concepts, or it's much more usual to come as a group and have one name, whereas in compositional context or festivals, everybody's used so much to single name that it's rather difficult to come up with either a split name or even a made up name, and that goes down to, like you just said, like payments and everything, where you say, okay, on what level do we create some kind of fairness or equal, which isn't always easy, I think, but it's important. And just maybe that's the thing also when you say, okay, I did compose all the music and you need to play, but there's still some kind of contribution on that level that needs to be credited, or on the other hand can be relaxing as well, maybe. No, it doesn't always need to be on front. Andrea, you specifically composed pieces for these people you work with, also on improvisational scale, like the Femme Savante. You composed music, and you also played other compositions by them. Is that different for you also? I mean, probably these social skills, and Jenny just mentioned, are probably among you solved before that anyway, but or not.
Yeah, first we found out that composing in a collective is crazily difficult. So we started to agree on, we have authorships, which is going again. I mean, I have the same, like Jenny described, when we improvise, of course, we share your royalties and everyone is the co-composer. But if we start to shape pieces in a special way, we started to have this authorship. So one was responsible and could ask the others. But as we are a composer performer, our material is so specifically created, shaped by everyone. The composer needed to work with that. So we need the collaboration, a very close collaboration to when Ute is doing, I don't know, and with her special thing, then please give me the sound, and how can you do this sound in a way that suits you best? Or even she would say, after this sound, I would have to go there. So you need to be flexible and in this way of collaborating. And the other thing, when I really compose, I still like to work with a very personal material of the people. I think they are better, or I like to see their personalities. So for example, when I work with the gestures that we saw in the video with the Femme Savante, also with Maulwerker, I worked in this way that I did interviews where I could see what kind of gestures is their personal gesture language. And then cut this out and say, please, can you do this once more, or whatever people like to do. So it's in a way, I don't know if you can see it in a critical way. So I suck them for their own, and then I use it for another context, which is mine. But so far it worked well. People are good in repeating their own gestures. Much more interesting to see that than when I give them an extra gesture that is not stored in their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is, I mean, the whole question that opens up here now again is really this, what you just mentioned, Andrea, before, that maybe this individuality is a bit overrated nowadays, or gets very crazy, that everybody sort of needs to be responsible for his or her position in the world, and this becomes more and more individualistic. So, and this group voice is something that maybe it's necessary to say, or maybe it's even relaxing. Maybe it's the word I was looking for. Relaxing to the people that are part of the group to say, I give you some material, which is like material I develop or my body just does, and you can use that, and that feels actually quite fine to say, I'll contribute. That's fine. And then as long as I can trust this person, which I guess especially in the long-term relationship you both have with different performers, be it a duo or bigger group, it can be enriching and even maybe relaxing for me to say, I'm not responsible here, but I'll do that, because it's also for an audience, and not only for my own pleasure to play. Please.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and that because the world I come from, the musical world, about collective approaches, non-hierarchical, I think it has, and utopian, everyone is free. I think it's very important to differentiate this, because I think this led to new hierarchies, of course, in collectives in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where maybe male were more dominant than females, or also in the groups that I know from 2000, where one person with a very strong aesthetic had dominated everyone else, so everyone was not daring anymore, but it was called free improvisation. So, and also aesthetically, sometimes this kind of very open and free and non-hierarchical leads to very much the same output. So to shape this in a new way and find other ways of collaboration where people can openly say, let's go there, and then, as you just described it, or to offer something and then to let somebody else work with that. So it's not this black and white freedom versus hierarchy or authority, but I think these times now, also in a lot of music collaborations that I observe, it's a mix, and it's a lot about negotiation, and it's less ideologic. So I would totally fight for specifications of how free and how not free collaborations work.
But do you talk within your groups about these? Let's say there comes, I mean, specifically for free improvisation groups that are rather new to each other, and there comes one person that dominates the whole group, sound-wise, for example. Do you talk about that, or even interrupt the situation and say, we need to find different ways to be present? Speaking of presence, there she is back.
Sorry, my internet crashed.
That's fine. We just try to
Improvise without me.
Yes. Now I was just asking Andrea if this is the case, that someone is dominating the group. Are there situations where you actively need to interrupt the process and talk about it?
It's hard. It's not easy. It's like in every group, maybe, I don't know how much when you are in a discussion, somebody talks more, how much you can do it in the moment. It's really not easy there. And now with our big group, people left because they thought their aesthetic is not represented. And I think this is super sad, because we have not the possibility to negotiate. Maybe we want to play once a piece with 3 chords and see what happens, but the person who like to play just chords or a chord progression thought this is not the space where I can try. So yeah, it's problems of society in music.
Yeah,
it's funny because I think some of those sort of social dynamics, like I think of Cobra by John Zorn, and I think of how that piece, you know, whenever I teach that piece, and we spend several weeks just learning the basics, and then we get to the point where somebody can be the guerrilla, like the terrorist, and I can always predict who will do it first. And I always say to the class, right, okay, I'm going to introduce this level of who can become the sort of the terrorist within the group. And I say, I don't want you to look at anybody, but I want you to think about who you think will be the first person who will do this. And then we do a set, and then it's always exactly who we predict it's going to be. And the class will say, yeah, we all knew it would be that person. And it's just simply because they're like, that's it's a personality thing. And then I say, okay, now you have to learn how to actually shut that person down, how to be a shy person and shut this down. And I was talking about this with Ok-Young Lee, and Ok-Young Lee was saying, yeah, when I get students to improvise, I say to them, right, even if it goes against your personality, can you now try to make a change, like make a really big change in the material? Like you're going to do a set, and at some point just decide, I'm going to try to actually change what's going on, even if it feels like it goes against my personality. And I sort of feel like it's with pieces like Cobra, or just with everyday improvisation, you're testing all these social relationships, you know, and you're sort of discovering things about your colleagues, you know, very rapidly in an improvisation that it might take you several hours or weeks of conversation to get to, you know.
Definitely. I think it's something. Yeah, we could spend next half an hour or two, but I really would love to hear, because like everybody else, I asked you in advance to to think about what you would ask the other person within this group. As from now on, we were like the ones who always kept you with questions. Well, this you already discussed a little bit, but still, I would at the end open this this talk to both of you, to find, because you never played together, have you?
We've played together in, like, because this is the thing, in preparing my questions, I was thinking, okay, I went to Andrea's apartment, it must have been 2004 or something like that, and we did the classic improv thing. We had a chat in the kitchen over a tea, and then we just went into the room with the inside piano and we improvised for a bit. and I was in your apartment again with, do you remember Go Lee Kwang, the Malaysian improviser? And we were there with Axel, and we were all doing actions and being recorded in your apartment again in like maybe January 2005 and stuff. But I don't know we've ever played together in public, but I feel like I've known you for a long time. And I was remembering we did the Oscillations Festival in Brussels, and you had that piece, and it was like maybe the first performance of the piece where it was just like the recordings of the inside piano rather than the inside piano. And then seeing you with Sabina and Lieu in Stuttgart in 2019. So I suppose, like, for me, it's very interesting because we've known each other for a long time. And in a way, there's some improvisers that even if you never played together in public, you still feel like you did. Because you're sort of, no, but I'm really serious, you're sort of fellow travelers, you know, over the years, and you see each other at festivals, and you listen to sets that you've done, and you know each other's work, and that's really beautiful, because you see this change, you see what stays the same, you see what changes both in life and also in art and things like that. So yeah, I don't think we've ever played together, but it sort of feels like we did, which is maybe the classic improv thing, you know. So.
Yeah, I have a question, or I wanted to, I remember this piece that I listened to you and the trio with Lee Patterson and the harp and organ player. Can you repeat her name? And
Anya, yeah, in Stuttgart as well, also that in that improv orchestra, yeah.
And this was a piece that I really liked a lot. It was an amazing piece of improvisation with three people, totally different characters, everyone very unique and stick to what they did, without being compromised by what the others did. So there was space for everyone, and at the same time it merged into each other in a whole thing in the space. It was very much also about the space, and that was so fascinating. And for me, it's one of the best things that can happen in improvisation, to see that everybody is not compromising, and anyway there's something third happens on top of the three of you. And my question would be, how much do you prepare for a piece? How much do you know how do you shape in advance that some structures or the form that what will happen in this next 40 or 50 minutes? Or do you go from second to second? Now I go there. Now I hear this. Also, you know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. With Lee and Anya, there's no shaping. Like we just do it. But I should say that it's sort of, you know, like Lee, I started playing with Lee back in 2014. And we did a project together, and we crucially had to share a bathroom in a house together for a week. So we were bonded like brother and sister by the end of that experience, because we were away together. But we were away together in Snape Maltings in the nature, you know, in the UK, working together on a project with other musicians also. And I got to know Lee. And then when I would play shows with Lee from time to time, you know, when we were in the same city. But when we did Time, both Anya and Lee were involved in that piece. So I got to know them even more. And so when the three of us play together, it sort of feels like 3 family members sneaking away to have a lovely holiday because the rest of the time crew aren't with us, you know, and we almost feel them as like little shadows alongside with us when it's the trio, because Martin Schmidt isn't with us, and normally we'd be used to having him in our midst. But through working with Anya and Lee, there was a real freedom because I love what they do. I completely adore the spaces that they open up with their music, and I can join them, but also I can put my stuff on top and it can coexist very peacefully. So it doesn't have to be in this one unified aesthetic. And I have to say, when I was in my 20s, it did feel a lot like you had to play in a certain type of aesthetic, you know, or that even different cities had their own aesthetics of a free improv scene. And if you didn't play in that way, you know, you were doing it wrong, or you were even committing like an act of disrespect against the music. And when I started playing with Tony Conrad, the irony, like he was in his late 60s, early 70s when I started playing with him. And what was really interesting for me was he did not care what aesthetic you played in, and he welcomed you doing completely bizarre turns, and I felt freer with him at that point than I had with any other person that I'd performed with. And since then I've sort of just, you know, I've just sort of learned to live with the fact that I will say to people, for example, is it okay if I use text? Because as a vocalist in a free improv, you already have a different, I would say, cognitive position, because everybody's brains are wired to prioritize processing for anything that comes out of somebody's mouth. So the second you use your voice in a free improv, the entire audience's brains go flip, and they just prioritize, and it's a subconscious thing, they can't control it. So I understand that. And I understand that if there's textual information coming from my mouth, part of their brain switches on, that, you know, the speech area switches on to process that. So I always try to be respectful and say, is it okay if I'm using text? And some people will say, oh, actually, I'd prefer if you didn't. Most people say, yeah, I don't care what you do, you know. So, but I love working with people like Lee, with Anya, because we can let those things coexist rather than thinking, you know, that Lee's aesthetic has to just be Lee's aesthetic and nothing can go on top of it that isn't matched with that. Do you know, or that Anya's aesthetic is hers and nothing can go on top of it that isn't like mapped onto it. So, you know, Lee really, really loves listening to, you know, funk music, you know, and stuff like that. So there's a lot more to Lee than the amazing world that he creates with his sound. So with them, it's, you know, when I say there's no plan, there's like a couple of years of playing together, you know, that was the plan, maybe, you know, that sort of gets us to that place. But I feel very lucky to get to play with people where we can layer anything. You know, I could play like a terrible techno tune on my phone and they would just roll with it, you know. So it's that sort of true freedom, I would say, rather than freedom within a sort of a predefined territory, you know. I have a question for you, which is what's very interesting to me is that, like, I was thinking about, you know, first getting to know you in the early 2000s through to today, like almost 20 years of seeing music. And I'm wondering what for you is the through line, you know, that you sort of see. Because when I first knew you, you were completely associated with the inside piano, you know, and that was sort of the world. And then I remember you telling me about Les Femmes Savantes when that was sort of kicking off. And then, you know, the last time I saw you play live, it was with Sabina and Eula, and there's like beats, and it's in a sort of a club world. And, you know, and even seeing the piece, this solo number 4 in Brussels, you know, the inside piano wasn't there. Instead, you were moving, you were throwing objects, you know, there was stuff coming out of the speakers. So for you as an artist, like at the time it seems confusing, but when we look back, it often seems clear, okay, I was interested in these things. How does that through line work through the work?
Yeah, nice question, but difficult. Maybe, I mean, my interest in sound is very, very high still. And it was very high by going into sound research, going also into this very detailed and microscopic world of sounds, a lot of silence. That's when we met in the reduced times, where also interesting to hear you who says that was a kind of dogma, I felt not free, and I really enjoyed to go into this crazily bounded area, because it was freeing me from other things that were not interesting for me, and you can only discover a world sometimes without other things. So exclusion is something totally against freedom, but exclusion can lead to something very crucial. So just to say about this phase, and at the same time, performativity, who's on stage, why, who's moving, and how. The whole person is so interesting for me as well. So I think that led me to shift my focus from this very narrow look into microscopic details of the sound into other microscopic details, as we saw when Hannah is using her boop, boop, boop in this 4-Akteure video. I love to connect this beauty of sound. It was this kind of little drops, and to make this even stronger by seeing this little finger that is doing, that is looking like creating this drop. So I think there's this connection of love and details. Then there's a big question for me: what is the motivation for music and what comes out? And is this possible that the essence of what is making you doing something, can it be transformed or translated into something else? So that's my last piece, when dancer, choreographer look at my practice and translate it into some performance. And I think it's about maybe it is something related to you and your alter egos. It's about understanding your wishes and needs and what comes out in another way, or transforming them. Maybe, yeah, or. And I mean, to leave the space of sound and to go into another world, it is, what is it? Maybe it's also the enjoyment of what is it? I mean, there's of course the one very easy idea: try something else.
Yeah.
Go into another room and look what is there. But I think there's also something that is going through one practice and another, and I'm curious to see what stays the same and what is getting different.
Wow, yeah, but I mean, at least for me, from what I've seen and heard from your pieces, there's always, through all these different stages of different media, maybe, or different, like maybe movement or sound, there's always this idea of clear, like this shaping out some clarity of some beautiful moments, maybe a sound or a gesture, that really there's a focus on these very small details in most of your works, at least as I experience. And then it's interesting when they shape to different form, like movements, and still it has this kind of signature of this how to grasp material, or how to access the world. And I think also there's this, what Jenny just said, it's a very beautiful definition actually of improvising, where you said, so there's this kind of possibility to coexist in a very peaceful way. And I think that, because that implies as well that everyone has its own, his or her own freedom to play or to do whatever they wish to, while at the same time you're very open to see and hear what the others are doing.
Yeah.
And because that creates this kind of peaceful way that you accept what the others are doing and you don't try to destroy that, while at the same time you don't try to hold back of your own stuff, which is in an ideal world would be the perfect coexistence probably.
I mean, I think the point is always that it's a choice rather than it's something that's imposed, because I definitely agree, Andrea, like there's improv people I've worked with that it's been a massive relief that we have this tight territory, you know, that we explore, because we're like, okay, great, now we can go really deep because we don't have all this other stuff happening. And it's just feeling that that's a choice, you know, that, and I think in some ways, like I felt with the little video that you showed, I felt quite emotional seeing Tony Conrad in the opening minutes, because when you stop playing with somebody, it is painful, you know. And when Tony died, I knew that's it. I never get to examine that exact same territory ever again, because it will never be the same with another person. It just can't be. And you sort of lose access to that territory that you investigated together and that sort of way of operating together. And that's the payoff. Like, you get the beautiful richness of collaborating with people, but then when they're gone, they're really gone. You know, you sort of have the artifacts, but it's, you know, if you write a book or you write a score, you know, it's there, you know, and even if it will remain there, but I think that's what's unique about collaborating like this. And it's sort of strange, because when I was a student, when the way that sort of my teachers would emphasize collaboration, especially when I was an undergrad, was it almost just felt like an assignment that you were given. You know, we'll pair up 10 of the composers with 10, you know, filmmakers, and you just sort of have to try and make it work together. Whereas in fact, collaborating is just more about social relationships, you know, that you build, and they feel completely organic, and it doesn't feel like, now I've decided to collaborate. It just feels like, okay, I do this thing here by myself this morning, and then in the afternoon I go and I do this thing with, you know, Tomomi or Panos or whoever, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a good keyword to end the session, because we were way over an hour, which is totally fine, because, I mean, that's fine. We're not in a TV program or anything, so it's totally great. Thank you so much for contributing here and being here and sharing the time with us. Everybody, if you have additionally questions or want to add something, and or maybe even have an idea where Andrea and Jenny can officially play together for the first time. Is there anybody out there who can program that? Please do so. I'd be very curious and would love to hear that. So please write us an email. You have the email address on the website where we host this video, or join us at 4 p.m. Central European Time in the Zoom conference. Andrea, Jenny, thank you so much.
Very much.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. Big pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot. So goodbye, everyone.
Bye.